What is up everyone, welcome back to a brand new video on Lex Selects. I am really relieved to say that I am back making content for the channel, and I'm recording a big batch of stuff today to keep you guys entertained for this week leading up to the Euros. We're going to briefly go through some videos that I've been meaning to make since the 23-24 season has ended. So one of the major ones, which is a tradition on this channel, I've got to now go back and react to my table predictions that I released all the way back in August before a ball had been kicked in the championship. My track record is a bit touch and go in terms of predictions, and I've done okay in parts this year, but you also see some really terrible predictions in there as well. I also like to read your guys' predictions as well, so we'll have a bit of that in the video as well. Let me know in the comments down below, guys, what was your best and what was your worst prediction? I would love to know all about that. If you guys like what we see, please smash the like button. It really does help the growth of this channel. Please do hit the subscribe button if you've not done so too. It really does help the growth of this channel. If you can get to 50 likes, I'll be absolutely appreciative. And please also share the channel too. All three of these things are free to do and they really help. But I'm going to go straight into it. Let's react to how well or poorly I predicted the Championship 23-24 table. So the first team I predicted to be relegated was Sheffield Wednesday, and no lie, I think a good majority of us predicted Sheffield Wednesday to finish in this exact position, and based what the first 11 games showed in the season, it did look like it was going to be the case. Xisco Munoz just wasn't walking into a team that looked prepared and looked like that they were going to be competitive for the championship. He got dismissed very quickly. But I could not anticipate the incredible appointment of Danny Röhl. Definitely someone who I would not have thought who would take over a championship club and get the response that he managed to get. It was incredible. They were completely written off. They were in the bottom three for a majority. I would say 90% of the season. Sheffield Wednesday were in the bottom three. But they ended the season so well and finished 20th in the end. An incredible achievement for Danny Röhl, and he's given a full season, and I think he will be certainly linked with other clubs looking at what he's done there to achieve that turnaround. But if he does get a full season, my goodness me, Sheffield Wednesday could go places. They really could. They were playing some really nice stuff towards the end of the season. I predicted 24th. I therefore was wrong. I did not anticipate the response they would get to dismissing Munoz. So my next team is a little bit of a better prediction. I predicted Rotherham to finish in 23rd. They actually finished rock bottom in 24th place. I think a couple were anticipating Rotherham to do okay this season, but personally I still wasn't too sure about the depth and quality of their squad. And I felt they started okay, but then when the chips went down and their form really collapsed off a cliff really by September time, and from then on they just had an impossible task. It felt just a bit too much of a bridge for Rotherham to get anything out of it, considering the high quality of points you had to accrue to get out of it. And the fact that Rotherham were really struggling with at that point when the teams around them were picking up points, it just made it even more demoralising for them. And unfortunately, I think all sense of momentum and motivation to try and get out of it was just defeated, you know, within, I would dare say, even when Liam Richardson came in, when Matt Taylor did eventually leave at the start of the season and Richardson came in, he didn't really get the response I think Rotherham would really wanted, unfortunately. He was then dismissed, and Steve Evans has managed to come in, steady a few things. They picked up a fantastic win against Cardiff in their final game of the season, but they're now back to League One, and it's now all focused to see if they can get out of it again. You know, they don't have the reliance of Paul Warne to get them out of League One, because he'll be a championship manager himself next season with Derby County. So this is going to be an intriguing summer for Rotherham, but I was right around in the ballpark, but I wasn't entirely spot on. So a close one, but no cigar. So the next team I predicted was QPR. This was certainly not my best prediction. I was 4 places off, likewise with Sheffield Wednesday. So QPR in the end finished 18th place. Based on the start of the season, just like with Sheffield Wednesday, I was onto something. I do think those 3 sides in Sheffield Wednesday, Rotherham and QPR, had the season ended in around December to January, this would have been spot on. But when Ainsworth was dismissed, I could not anticipate the unbelievable appointment of Marty Cifuentes. Likewise with the Danny Roll factor, I did not anticipate the response that both of these sides would find within their quality and their depth to be as competitive as they were. And QPR were picking up some incredible wins at the end of the season, beating Leeds and Coventry in their last 2 games to end the season as well as they did. It's no easy feat. There's no surprise that Cifuentes has got a lot of managerial interest, including the Sunderland job, which I think is quite interesting. So if QPR can keep hold of Cifuentes, I think, likewise with Sheffield Wednesday, I've got a lot more optimism for them coming into next season. So I was wrong, but again, this was really skewed off my prediction just based on the unbelievable quality and response they got with a brand new managerial head. We're now approaching the teams outside of the bottom 3, and this is the first team I accurately predicted. It was Plymouth Argyle, and I won't lie, putting Plymouth in 21st was one of those gut feeling predictions. I did feel that Plymouth all season would have written themselves as an underdog team, a team that most people would have predicted to get relegated and they would find something within to survive. Now, I did not anticipate it to go in the way that it did, so ultimately, story goes, Steven Schumacher actually has a brilliant start with Plymouth, and they were actually really overperforming my prediction. But things unravel when Stoke City snatch Steven Schumacher from Plymouth Argyle, and honestly, I really could not predict like the downturn in their form when he left. Now, they were already having an issue with their away form, but their home form, Plymouth, was absolutely sensational, and they looked like that at home park they could not be stopped. Then they got Foster in, which, yeah, it didn't work. I didn't even need to acknowledge any Plymouth fans. They would tell you that it did not work at all. He was dismissed, and then Jules Shipp, basically the caretaker, actually was in charge right at the end of the season, and he picked up an incredible win against Leicester, which I felt was going to be enough to keep them up. But then, likewise, what I've been talking about, QPR and Sheffield Wednesday having incredible form, Plymouth had to get something against Hull City on the final day where they were still having a small outside chance of getting top 6, and they won that as well. So all of a sudden, Plymouth knew how to win at home again, and those 2 home wins were the difference. Now, I do think Plymouth are going to be a team in danger next year, I won't lie, unless Wayne Rooney does some good transfer business, but based on his track record, especially with Birmingham, who we'll be talking about very, very soon, I do fear that potentially they could be a side lingering around that position of the table. But fair play to Plymouth, and thank you for finishing 21st, because that's my first and hopefully of many correct predictions. But now we've faced my worst predictions so far, Cardiff City. I predicted them to finish in 20th. And to be fair, Cardiff I felt was one of those sides which different creators and users and watchers of the Championship would have had different opinions on. I think the squad in itself, you would argue, should be a mid-table squad, and they finished directly in the middle of the Championship in 12th place in the end. But I think there was just so much uncertainty about Errol Ballou. I just wasn't too convinced with him going down to the Championship. But again, if I knew more about him, potentially I would have backed him. And I think Cardiff had a sensational start, actually. And Cardiff have been around mid-table throughout this season. I didn't really think there was a stage of more than 1 or 2 weeks where they had any fear of relegation at all. So in that regard, I think Cardiff have taken a really good step of improvement here. And now that Errol Ballou is confirmed to stay on as Cardiff's manager, he signed a new deal recently. Let's see if Cardiff can reinvest well in the market and can potentially take 2 steps further forward to potentially start closing in those top 6 places. Because ultimately, I think Cardiff being having the recent success that they've had in the Championship, they really should be targeting around that region of the table. But fair play to them, they really decided to prove me wrong, which maybe it was my arrogance of not knowing about Errol Ballou and the quality of their squad, but definitely with some of their home games, they've definitely delivered, and they've earned that 12th place as well. So fair play to them, I was certainly wrong about them. So next in my predictions was Huddersfield. I won't lie, I was really hoping to see Huddersfield and Birmingham a little bit sooner than this. So Huddersfield I predicted as high as 19th, and I probably just considered Neil Warnock staying for the whole season. And I felt if Neil Warnock did stay, I think Huddersfield would have had a stronger chance to survive. Now, ultimately, Huddersfield were relegated on the final day, but the margin of points that they got relegated by in the end was 6 points, which I think is quite conclusive that they deserved relegation, unfortunately, right in the end. I think the team on paper is around a relegation threatened side, and I would still argue 19th place would have been a more realistic prediction for Huddersfield, but I did not anticipate Neil Warnock to leave as quickly as he did. And I think their replacement choice to get Andre Breitenreiter in and Darren Moore, neither really worked out, let's be real. Darren Moore got a load of draws in and just barely any wins whatsoever. Breitenreiter had a couple of decent spells, but then ultimately Huddersfield just could not sustain the performance throughout the 90 minutes from what I saw. So ultimately, this was one of the examples of a team investing in a manager where it has the opposite effect and it sends them backwards. Because I do think Huddersfield was still, they were pretty precarious, but they were still above the bottom three. And right now, those managerial appointments just dragged them into that battle. And unfortunately, they just did not produce the same level of consistent results as the other teams around them. So they're back in League One, Huddersfield, for the first time in 13 years. They're going to have to really dig deep and try and get something out of it. Could their new appointment of Michael Duff do it? Who knows? I think it's going to be an interesting one. It will be another Yorkshire club that he'll be taking over. Potentially they could get something from him. So next in my predictions was Preston North End. This is certainly up there with Cardiff as being my worst prediction so far. I could not predict that Preston would start the season as well as they did. They were actually, I think, having the second longest unbeaten run at the start of the season. I could not believe how well Preston were going. They were at one point toe-to-toe with Leicester in around the September point of the season. I could not believe how well they started. Eventually, around the turn of the year from December to January, things started to derail a little bit. Then they went on a good form again, but then in the end of the season, good blimey, Preston really blew it. They lost that game against Norwich where they were still, teetering around the playoff race. They lost that game at Deepdale by that late goal. And then after that, they checked out. They were on the beach. They really did not produce, I don't think, any points after that game, actually. And I think it was 6 consecutive defeats. And the form books will tell you, if that form carries on to next season, Preston could be a team in danger next year. And the stats would tell you that despite scoring as many points as they did, they've not created much. I do fear for Preston. I will be intrigued to see how they deal with the transfer window. Can they get some star strikers in? That makes me think, you know what? I can see some goals coming out of them. Because right now, I'm not seeing many goals in this Preston side next season. And if they do not improve their defensive quality, I really dread to think of where Preston could be next year. Because I think next year is going to be just as competitive as this year. Coming up next in my table is their local rivals, Blackburn. I predicted them in 17th. They finished 19th in the end. So actually I predicted them 2 places too high in the end. I actually thought I was being a bit harsh on Blackburn. I seem to remember in the videos that I felt a little bit bad predicting them this low. It was just for the fact that I couldn't really put them any higher based on how strong I considered the other teams being. But I did not consider Blackburn to go through the roller coaster of their season that they did. Start of the season, they were right up there. They were doing okay. They were scoring loads of goals, Blackburn, but they were also shipping so many as well. And unfortunately, it got to a stage where they were shipping so many at a consistent basis, they just lost that defensive stability. And they've got Sammy Szmodics to thanks for the goals that they did score. He ended up being the top goal scorer in the end, which is sensational. I'm really, really pleased for Sammy Szmodics. On the whole, they changed John Dale Thomason to John Eustace, who actually started off managing Birmingham. The whole managerial saga, I think, has been one of the biggest stories of this year, which has been absolutely crazy. The chopping and changing and the dramas and the BS interactions would make you think that it's all one big soap opera, honestly. But I do think with Blackburn, I think John Eustace was the right call in the end because Blackburn was safe. And they really did not look safe at one point, Blackburn. I really looked at their last run of games thinking, this really could be curtains for Blackburn. It really could. But they pulled it together. They kept their composure. John Eustace produced a lot more draws, a lot more clean sheets, so he was dealing with a defensive issues with this Blackburn side, and ultimately they got rewarded for it. Now, again, like Preston, I do think they will be around that region of the table if they do not reinvest. Sammy Szmodics will undoubtedly get some interest from Premier League clubs, I would even dare think, as well. So if he's let go, Blackburn really got to focus on getting as high of a fee as possible, because they need to reinvest that to bolster that whole squad. So ultimately, I wasn't too far away in the end, but certainly did not anticipate the route that Blackburn were going to take to get to 19th in the end of this season. Now, this next prediction is pretty bad, guys. I predicted Birmingham to finish 16th. They finished 22nd. They got relegated in the end. And with the new ownership, I could not predict that at all. And I really don't think many did. There may have been one that I saw that could have predicted Birmingham to go down there because of the ownership change. But this was the biggest example of a self-sabotage since Birmingham did the exact same thing to Gary Rowett, where they were, punching above their weight, don't get me wrong, and they were certainly punching above their weight with John Eustace. But they were playing with confidence. They were playing good football. The team was together. They were getting results that, I think a lot of Birmingham fans did not expect. But he's then shipped off. The management and the new ownership get in Wayne Rooney for a big name replacement, and ultimately it's single-handedly one of the worst managerial appointments I've seen, especially in the modern Championship era. I could not believe how bad their form had collapsed since he took over. So unfortunately, they were given a really difficult task from now on in. And actually, I think when Mowbray had his brief spell, I thought he did okay. And I dare say Rowett actually did okay as well. But again, we're talking about how competitive QPR, Sheffield Wednesday were picking up their points. Plymouth were picking home points as well. There were so many sides just picking up points on a consistent basis. And because Birmingham did not do it consistently enough, despite some good wins along the way, including one against Norwich in their final game of the season, and getting over 50 points, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough in the end. And it's rare to get relegated with 50 points, which is why I really do feel sorry for Birmingham in the end. But they're down back to League One. I mean, it's been since the 90s since they've been down in League One. So Birmingham certainly would now have to reevaluate the decisions that they've made to get them down into League One. And they've got to be very careful not to make more mistakes, because I do think Birmingham, with the plans that they've got, they need all the money they can get, and they need to get back to the Championship ASAP. They should certainly be one of the favourites to get out of League One, but will they? It's hard to tell. League One is not an easy league to get out of. So 16th place is probably where I think they should have been, based on the players, based on the ownership model. But yeah, they were anything but 16th. They were either amazing or they were right down in the bottom three. So in the end, I was wrong by all accounts for Birmingham there. So here's a better improvement of a good prediction. I predicted Swansea City to finish 15th. They finished 14th. I was one place off in the end, and they probably could have finished 15th had they got a worse result in their final game of the season. But, I can't complain too much. It is in and around that region anyway. And I think their season tailed off to kind of be what I expected. Just going up and down with their form, just not having too much of a consistency. I felt Swansea at the end of the season did pick up some really, really good consistency about them. So ultimately, their form wasn't amazing at the start of the season. They got Luke Williams in that they managed to get from Notts County, who has actually already had an affiliation with Swansea. He was the assistant manager when Russell Martin was in charge, of course, so he does have a good connection with Swansea here. And ultimately, I think he did okay. I think the football that Swansea were playing, really did start to catch my eye. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see how Swansea go around their way next season. Can they potentially kick on from that position? So I am a little bit intrigued to see how Swansea go. Based on the football that they're playing, I think it's worth keeping your eye on them. And can't complain about my prediction. I was very, very close in the end. However, following from that decent prediction, we get to a bad one. Hull in 14th place. So they finished in the end in 7th place in the end. They were really close to the top 6. But ultimately, even if they won in the end, it didn't matter. I think Norwich were practically safe regardless. And Hull, I gotta say, likewise at Cardiff, were competitive for pretty much the entire season. It has ended in pretty sour fashion, unfortunately. Liam Rosenior, we looked as a young upcoming manager with great potential, and I do think he was getting around the standard that the board were expecting. But then in January, they got some incredible signings in. Carvalho being one big example of an unbelievable transfer that they made. And certainly with those signings, you would have expected Hull to kick on, but unfortunately they didn't. I don't know what it was about them. It felt like to me that it was almost like the expectations really weighed on the players, and they really did struggle to cope with it. And it was a shame, really, because it has ended up with Hull finishing in a better position, a much better position than last year. But it's ended up with Liam Rosenior losing his job, unfortunately, and that's the brutal business of football. But the ownership looked like they did invest in expecting, for Hull to be around 6th place, or at least in the top 6 from those investments. And unfortunately, Liam Rosenior didn't deliver it, despite I've been doing an okay job this season. So I have no doubt Liam Rosenior will find another job soon. He's definitely got a decent stock on him, I think, based on what he's done managerial-wise. I was certainly wrong immediately from the start. I knew from a couple of games in, Hull looked really competitive and really good. So fair play to them. They proved me wrong, and they certainly overperformed for what I predicted of them in August. The bad predictions keep on coming. What's going on with me this year? I've not done too good of a job as I believed I did. So I predicted West Brom to finish 13th, and I felt like I got a bit blinded by other creators thinking West Brom were going to collapse, and I think it was sort of like we were trying to outsmart the unpredictability of the Championship, of a side that we shouldn't expect to be in that position, finish in that position. And in the end of the day, I'd argue that team should have been Sunderland or Watford, I would argue, right at the end. So I think we did anticipate that one team, who shouldn't be finishing anywhere near that position, ended up finishing. But West Brom, I think the indicators of predicting them to be there was their lack of transfer business, potentially the squad size as well. But they've got some really good experienced heads in that squad, and that was proven to get them all the way to the playoffs in the end. And I've got to say, I think they were very competitive, actually. I knew they lost out to the eventual winners, Southampton, in the end, but I felt, especially in their home game, I thought they were very competitive. They gave Southampton a really good game, actually. And I would not be too shocked to see if Carlos Corberán gets a bit of interest from Leicester, because Leicester are going to be currently looking for a new manager, and they could look at Corberán being a pretty cheap replacement, but I do think he has got a decent stock on him at the moment. With his last 2 seasons in the Championship, he's managed to guarantee, getting 2 playoff finishes. So I do honestly think that Corberán can do well, especially in the Championship. Premier League may be a bit of a big step for him, but he's certainly proven to me that he is a good Championship manager now. Managing to get to the playoffs for 2 separate teams is not an easy feat. And I got to apologise for West Brom fans for thinking that they would be around there, because I was certainly wrong, and at no point in the season did it look like that they will be there. They kind of stayed 5th throughout the entire season, actually. We've now made it to the top half of the table now. In 12th place, I predicted Stoke City. Now, that is wrong by 5 places. They finished 17th in the end. And I won't lie, Stoke's start of the season was horrific. It really was. I thought Alex Neil can kick on, and I thought with him being a good Championship manager, I felt he would get Stoke, producing results. And ultimately, it's the same scenario for Stoke. They just go through stages of the season where they lack confidence going forward. And when a couple of bad results go around, it's like all of a sudden the pressure really weighs down on their shoulders, and they cannot produce the results required. they were really in danger of relegation at one point. Schumacher came in and actually had a pretty slow start when he was, appointed as Stoke's replacement boss. But fair play to them for sticking with him. They saw that there was something there. They, certainly, if they changed it, last minute, a bit like what Huddersfield did from Moore to Brighter, I felt Stoke could have been in around a position where Birmingham would have been and finished the last team getting relegated. But Stoke showed bravery to stick with him and actually produced some brilliant results in the end of the season as well. I think certainly Stoke are a side that can certainly be a great team to watch. It's their lack of consistency that really, lets them down, unfortunately. And 12th place, maybe I was being a bit optimistic with them there. I'm certainly going to be a little bit more careful predicting Stoke City going into next season, but I think they certainly would take survival based on how poor they started the season. For many, many bad predictions, I'm pleased to say we finally got another team spot on. Bristol City finished 11th. And this is one of the more random correct teams that I predicted. I honestly think the middle part of the championship is by far the most difficult place to predict. And I'm not going to take too much credit with this. I felt Bristol City was one of the more obvious sides that would have finished around that mid-table position. They certainly had a squad too good to go down, and that was proven to how they started in the season. Then results started to tail off, and they were starting to, creep down a little bit in the table. And, had they not reacted sooner, they could have been pulled into the fight. Then they got Liam Manning in, which I'm pleased for him. He got his championship opportunity. He had so many opportunities to link up with a championship side, and just things never materialised. He was given this opportunity, a really good opportunity, and I've got to say he imparted his authority pretty quickly. Results started coming in, and Bristol City were chipping in results at the odd occasion, and as a result of that, they weren't surging up the table, but they were consistently staying around that middle part of the table. And I've got to say, next year, I think I'm intrigued with Liam Manning in a full season in charge of this Bristol City side. Can he potentially find a way to get more consistency with this squad? I certainly think it's a very talented squad with so many good young potential players that could really, well, for one, be sold at a great profit, but could also provide a really good service to get Bristol City in a more improved position of the table. But I've got to say, 11th place, I think it's a decent position for Bristol City to finish there. It's certainly a great improvement from last year. So here's the team I guarantee 99% of you got wrong. Apart of course, if you're second tier, of course. Ipswich Town. So I predicted 10th place, which I actually convinced myself that was too high. Little did I know that was 8 places too low. They finished second place. They had gained back-to-back promotions. The only time that this has happened in the modern championship history has been Southampton and Norwich. It's mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. I cannot believe this. They are a Premier League side, Ipswich Town. I cannot even wrap my head around that. It's the first time they've been in the Premier League for 22 years. I'm 24, so they've been nearly out of the Premier League nearly as long as, when I was born. I mean, that is insane. It is insane. And you've got to highlight the incredible work of Kieran McKenna. The fact that he is staying on, I don't know how much persuasion he was needed, but he's staying on. That is bigger than any signing Ipswich can make all season. The fact that they've got the mastermind behind it, he can certainly give this team a little bit of a chance. I'm almost certain that 100% of teams and, creators are going to be predicting Ipswich to go down, and that's fine. I almost think that I might predict them to go down, and, I may be seen as a pessimist for that, but the Premier League is a really different beast, and we've seen good championship teams struggle in it. Burnley's a great example of that for this year. So I wouldn't even be surprised if they do struggle next year. But you have to give, credit to what they managed to achieve in a championship season where their budget was substantially lower than all the other sides relegated from the Premier League that had, you know, up to hundreds of millions, you know, in worth of their budget. It is insane. Absolutely insane. I've not seen like an underdog team get automatically promoted probably since Sheffield United under Chris Wilder. That, I think, is the last team I can think of in memory that has gained automatic promotion. You know, you could think of Luton Town last year getting promotion, but that was via the playoffs. You know, automatic promotion is insane, and it's absolutely incredible. And this, for me, typifies for what the Championship should be all about, and not being, you know, dominated by the teams with the high parachute payments. So Ipswich, second place. Who could have saw that coming? So my predictions don't improve from now on, really. Ninth place, I predicted Watford. So I did kind of anticipate Watford would not have the season they should be expecting. You know, based on Watford's success in the Championship, you should be thinking that they'll be up there, you know, a bit similar to Cardiff and West Brom. They struggled, they really, really did. And they started the season incredibly. Their performances, I remember their first game of the season where they tore QPR apart, and I was thinking, oh my god, what a team Watford looks this year. And then I really do not know what happened to that team. It was like that they got replaced by doppelgangers who just could not play anywhere near to what they could have done in their first game. In the end, they finished 15th, which is nowhere near good enough. It's nowhere near good enough for what Watford should be expecting. They've appointed Tom Cleverley as their new manager in the end, and I do see some improvements and some progress there. He didn't win too many games, but he certainly hardly lost as well. So if he can convert those draws to wins, I think Watford could have a really good shot of getting back to where they should be. But it's all really down to transfer business. Their squad is certainly not as strong as it used to be. They've certainly let a lot of the big individuals go that have supplied Watford with so much success in their recent history. So I do think they're going to have to take a new direction and get some really clever recruitment in. I predicted ninth. I was certainly predicting them to have a poor season, but certainly not as poor as it turned out to be in the end. Coming in at 8th place was Norwich City. So they finished 6th place in the end, and I'm slightly annoyed I did not predict them to finish 6th actually. I think a lot of it was doubtful considering how poor they were in the previous year. They got David Wagner in charge, and I personally felt that they were just going to be so inconsistent, and they did have an element of that inconsistency, especially in their away form, but their forward line had proven to me that it can be as good as any Championship side. But their defence, blimey, it did not turn out to be great. I mean, neither was Ipswich, to be fair. So I do think the defence was the biggest weakness for Norwich, and it was certainly exposed, especially in their last game regarding the playoff semi-final second leg, to lose the way that they did. It was certainly embarrassing, and it cost David Wagner his job, actually. So David Wagner was let go, but Norwich have acted pretty quickly to this, and they've already got a new managerial appointment in. I'm really intrigued to see how Johannes Borup is going to be, because I've heard some good things about him. His side, I mean, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but he's in the Danish Super League, and they managed to qualify for the Conference League, the same competition that Chelsea are going to be in. So I do think that there's some good qualities there, and I will be intrigued to see how he gets on. I think he can be seen as a pretty bright young manager. I think he's only 35 as well, so could potentially be a good youthful young manager. So I don't know, it's going to be an interesting one, but I'm not going to take the trap as I took for Cardiff and to put Norwich in a lower finish simply because I don't know too much about his managerial style. So I do think it's an interesting appointment for Norwich. I like the approach that they're taking. So this next prediction again is not great. I've not really covered myself in too much glory this year in my predictions, I can't lie, but I predicted Millwall to finish 7th and they finished 13th. So I was 6 places off. I mean, I'm going to put this season down for being one of the most unpredictable seasons. And I think seeing teams like Ipswich get automatically promoted, I think I can earn that season, that title. But honestly, with Millwall, I did think that they were cooking with something. I really got to be honest. Rowett was dismissed very, very early on. And then they went for a very interesting approach to get Joe Edwards in, and it did not work. It really did not work. I wouldn't say as to the extent of Foster for Plymouth. I think that for me and Rooney for Birmingham, I think those two will certainly be the worst managerial appointments this year. But Joe Edwards, it felt uninspiring. I think that's the word that I can pick out. It just felt uninspiring overall. And honestly, I think getting Neil Harris back did feel like a sentimental move, but my God, was it a smart decision. The upturn in form was sensational. They were in the bottom 3 when Neil Harris took over, and he's got them to finish in 13th place. That is incredible. Now, I do think the football that they were playing is not quite sustainable as I would have expected from like Danny Royle for Sheffield Wednesday, Cifuentes for QPR. So I do think that Millwall could be in danger in finishing around that lower part of the table next year. But I always will think that they can get something out of it with someone like Neil Harris in charge, who has had really good experience in the Championship. Fair play to them. They, finish around mid-table. I don't know what I was thinking. I certainly would have thought that it was going to be right throughout the whole season and he was going to kick on to where they finished. And they finished pretty devastatingly last season, missing out on the playoffs in the way that they did. I felt that they could improve from it, and no, it wasn't the case like that at all, sadly. We finally made it to the top 6 sides. I feel like I've been talking about these predictions forever. So, 6th place, I predicted Middlesbrough. They finished 8th place in the end, and based on how poor they started the season, the fact they were only 2 spaces off has certainly made it look a little bit more better than what I predicted, but I certainly should have predicted that there would be a hangover period for Middlesbrough and Michael Carrick in the way that things unravelled in terms of last season. But yeah, I don't know. I felt a bit excited that Middlesbrough were really going to be knocking on the door and really have a good shot of trying to get into the Premier League via the playoffs. But yeah, it didn't turn out to be that case. I do think, players like Latte La did quite well near the end of the season, but had those attacking players been on point at the start of the season, potentially Middlesbrough would have accrued enough points to get up there. But ultimately, it was a team that was doing okay, but just peaked too late into the season to do anything spectacular. So I predicted 6th, but that certainly was niced out based on how well Middlesbrough were around the second half of the season. In 5th place, I had Coventry. So both Middlesbrough and Coventry were around that region and were competitive for the top 6, but both just did not have enough. And Coventry, again, had a lot of new signings, and I maybe was a bit optimistic that the gap of Victor Gyökeres was going to be filled by one of Ellis Sims or Haji Wright, and it took a bit of time for both of them to really settle into their roles. But I do think when they did settle, I felt Coventry were going on to something. Then they had that long stay in the FA Cup where we did not know in the end, but they took the champions of the FA Cup to a penalty shootout. They were so close, Coventry, to potentially having a good shot of winning the tournament. But in the end of it, unfortunately, just so many games piled up on them too short of a time, and it just ultimately wasn't enough. They did not have the squad that could handle that sort of strain of games. So I do feel bad for Coventry, but I do think that they can improve next year. I really do have faith that they can get back to that competitive region of the top 6. And certainly I think they've coped, so much better than I expected. Even though I did not really factor the playoff final hangover to Coventry, and they finished lower to what I predicted them, I think that whole attitude this season has been great. But I certainly think next season, if they can keep all those players, they certainly should be better next year. And here is the prediction I did not want to reveal, but here it is. Sunderland, 12 places. Oh dear, Sunderland, 4th place, and they finished 16th. Where did it all go wrong here? So, Sunderland were a side I think, again like Cardiff, many people have different opinions on. I think a good half of the camp thought that Sunderland would drop off, considering how much of it was a miracle for them to finish 6th, being promoted automatically from League One. But I did not anticipate them to drop as much as they did. So ultimately, they let Mowbray go, which it would have been very interesting to see if Mowbray did stay on, and then if he did have his health situation, which, you know, I do pray for him in that. But that would have been very interesting to see where Sunderland would have been had he stayed on, and then they would have had to change due to Mowbray's health scare potentially. But they got rid of him, and then they appointed Mick Beale, who obviously had success previously with QPR for the very short time he spent there at QPR. And then, yeah, it was... In fact, I almost forgot about that. That is potentially the worst appointment in the Championship. So there's so many inspired managerial appointments, but there's also been some managerial appointments that have been horrific all season. And yeah, in the end of the season, it kind of went with their caretaker boss, and then they checked out. They really did not look like they had any ambition to climb up the table. They checked in, and they finished 16th as a result of that. So certainly a season that Sunderland will want to forget in like 2/3 of that season. First half of the season, or the first third, I should correct myself, I felt it wasn't as strong as last year, but they certainly weren't like too bad. But this is another level of it. And yeah, they certainly will be wanting to improve the next season. I cannot believe I had Sunderland fourth. I cannot believe it. So now we're making it to the top three. I think everyone had the same three teams. I think everyone predicted the newly relegated sides to be around that top three. And lo and behold, it wasn't quite the case, which we'll reveal soon. So third place Leeds, I got correctly. So it was very typical Leeds fashion. They certainly played like a side that should have wrapped up automatic promotion. They ultimately dropped too many points at the crucial stage of the season. QPR 4-0 was a devastating defeat for them. Losing to Southampton twice in the way that they did was devastating as well. There was just too many instances where Leeds dropped points, and despite Ipswich dropping some points as well, it wasn't enough. I mean, 90 points is sensational to get in any championship season, don't get me wrong. But for the fact that that only gets you third place just tells you the competitiveness this year. Now, it does feel like to me that Daniel Farke is staying on as Leeds manager, but it is certainly going to be interesting. And I think there could be financial restrictions for Leeds next year. So I really do think it's going to be an interesting challenge. And to be fair, Daniel Farke did get Norwich promoted at the second attempt with his second season. I should be expecting Leeds to be right up there. They really, really should be up there in the Premier League. And ultimately, they're going to have to suffer. Well, maybe suffer's not the right word. Leeds will probably put it down as suffer. But they'll have to endure another championship season where I think there could be a max exodus of players going. So in second place, I predicted Southampton. So position-wise, not that great, but actually I'm really pleased with this prediction in a way that I did anticipate Southampton to go straight back up. I was just incorrect in the method that they were doing it with. So Southampton certainly, I think what distinguished them with them and Leeds is that they had a forward line that they could rely upon. I think the striker position for Leeds felt like for me that it was with individual players that weren't necessarily the go-to striker to put the goals in. Bamford, Pirro kind of rotating there, Rutter again. I thought Rutter had a good season actually, but it wasn't like they had a recognisable striker that they would rely upon. They had two in Che Adams and Adam Armstrong, and in the end I think they lent more towards Adam Armstrong being the more reliable one. And I'm really, really pleased for them again. I'm really happy for Russell Martin. I think his football is great in the way that he sets his teams up. And I do think he's going to get a really big challenge in the Premier League, don't get me wrong, like I was with Ipswich. But I do think with some of those players who have been in the Premier League before, I think Southampton are equipped and could potentially surprise a couple of people next year. And finally, to wrap off my table predictions, I predicted Leicester to win the Championship. Now, I'm not going to give myself a pat on the back for that because I think 99% of people predicted this. So I'm not already going to give myself too much credit. And oh my gosh, did they give me a scare that I think that they were going to throw it away. They only won by 1 point in the end, so they did look like one of the best teams in the world to then suddenly looking like one of the worst teams in the world. So they couldn't really make their mind up there, and I would not have predicted that their manager would then be a Chelsea manager this time next year. I mean, the footballing world is crazy. It really, really is. But Leicester did win the championship in the end, I'd say, for a good 4/5 of the season, 80% of the season. I think it has been deserved. So, my final predictions look like this. So, four correct. I was going to say three, but four correct teams. So, that in itself looks okay. But if I accumulate all the positions wrong, I accumulated 100 points. That is actually 4 points worse than last year, which I'm quite surprised with, considering I got 4 correct teams, which I think is substantially more than what I got last year. So, in the end, okay, but then also, again, it could have been better. I'm so annoyed on that Sunderland prediction. I'm really annoyed at that West Brom prediction as well. There's a couple there. Cardiff, I think I should have been better with as well. There's a couple there that certainly felt a bit more obvious that I should have picked up on. But again, just kind of following the crowd and seeing what other creators were doing. And, you know, that's proven to me that maybe I don't need to do that. So guys, to end off the video, I'm going to read your predictions that you left for me in my predictions video. So I'll be reading them now. So this prediction has come from Manic76. They predicted Leicester and Southampton, so to be in the top 2, agreeing with mine. Leicester, of course, winning it. Southampton finishing 4th in the end, so slightly off, but, you know, around the same thing as I predicted. He predicted that there was going to be 9 teams fighting for playoffs, and I think he was correct with that. Middlesbrough 3rd was wrong. Leeds 4th was close but wrong. Norwich 5th was close. Oh, no, actually, wait, did they say? No, yeah. No, they finished 6th in the end because they could not beat Birmingham on the final day, so that was wrong. Coventry 6th, slightly wrong. Sunderland 7th, oh dear. So he made a poor mistake like me. Millwall 8th, wrong as well, and Watford 9th. So, in terms of that region of the table, sadly no correct teams in the positions, but he was very close with Leeds and Norwich, actually. He was very, very close with those. Teams that could break into the playoffs, he went for Stoke, West Brom, and Ipswich. So, I think that was an interesting region to break that down as, and West Brom certainly earned that playoff place in the end for how comfortably they were. Stoke, yeah, did not turn out to be, and Ipswich, I mean, we all know what happened there. It's sensational, really. Best of the rest and could break into the playoff, so they've gone for Swansea, Bristol City, Blackburn, Birmingham, Preston, and Hull. So certainly the best prediction out of all of those ones would have been Swansea. So Swansea really did finish pretty much there in the championship table in the end. Bristol City was a little bit too low in the end. Blackburn and Birmingham were much lower, fighting relegation, and Preston and Hull were in that cluster of teams fighting for playoffs until the end or final couple of games. And then these were the teams that they anticipated to be in danger. 19th Plymouth, Sheffield Wednesday 20th is correct, so well done. Cardiff 21st is substantially wrong, sadly. And then the bottom 3 of QPR, and then you got Huddersfield and Rotherham spot on. So if I count it right, that's 4 to 5 teams that Maniac 76 got correct. So well done. Did really, really well there. So then another user that predicted the whole table was Blue Terrier. So they got QPR, Rotherham and Cardiff. Not in the correct position, but Rotherham is near around there. Cardiff and QPR weren't relegated in the end. He predicted Sheffield Wednesday to survive, so fair play. Watford 20th, that is a brave prediction, but actually closer to getting it correct than what I did in the end. Then Stoke 19th, very close with that. 18th Plymouth, close. 17th Bristol City turns out to be wrong in the end. 16th Swansea is not a million miles away at all, actually. I felt that's actually a pretty good prediction there. 15th Bristol City, okay. 14th Preston, a little bit too low. Hull, definitely too low. Blackburn, definitely too high. Ipswich, too low. Huddersfield 10th. Oh dear me. So that's 13 places off, sadly. And Sunderland 9th was not a great one either. They finished 16th in the end. 8th, Millwall, not particularly amazing. West Brom 7th is a decent prediction. Norwich 6th is correct. Southampton 5th is slightly too low. Same with Leeds being slightly too low. Coventry 3rd, quite a fair bit too high in the end. Middlesbrough second, quite a fair bit too high in the end, and then Leicester winning it. So that is 2 correct positions there. So that's a decent work on job there from Blue Terrier. Wallace and Gromit fan had this to predict. Predicting Plymouth, Ipswich and Cardiff. It's one of those ones that predicted Ipswich to go down. 21 places off, let's just say. So Cardiff 22nd is also slightly wrong. Rotherham to survive was a bit brave. Birmingham 20th is actually pretty close, so I'll give him that. Sheffield Wednesday 19th is very close, so he was quite unlucky with that. Bristol City and Hull definitely too low. Huddersfield 16th too high. Stoke, very close actually to getting that correct in the end. Swansea 14th, pretty much there, so he did really well there. QPR 13th, not a million miles away actually, so he's done well. Coventry slightly too low. Preston, he got really close with. Southampton 10th is quite an interesting one there to finish as low as that. West Brom 9th, a bit too low there. Blackburn definitely too high there. Millwall definitely too high. Middlesbrough a little bit too high, not a million miles away. Sunderland is certainly too high there. That's 11 places off. Leeds 4th is close. Watford 3rd is too high as well, quite substantially too high too. Norwich 2nd, and then Leicester winning the championship. So at least he got Leicester correctly right at the end. So this was Tom predicting the championship. Birmingham 24th. So that is actually one of the few people predicting Birmingham to go down. Rotherham 23rd was very close, and Cardiff City. So it doesn't look like I was alone predicting Cardiff to not have a good season. Sheffield Wednesday to survive was very close with that. QPR 20th, also very close with that as well. 90th. So I've got to say, the top 3 places from the bottom 3, had he swapped them around, that would have been almost perfect there. So then Huddersfield 18th, too high. Hull 17th, way too low, sadly. Blackburn 16th was very close, actually. Norwich 15th, definitely too low. Preston 14th, slightly too low. Stoke 13th is not a million miles away. Ipswich, I mean, that's 10 places off, sadly. Bristol City 11th is correct, fair play. Then Watford 10th. Yeah, definitely a little bit too high there. Coventry 9th, he got correct, so well done, Tom. 8th Leeds, certainly too low there. Millwall 7th, not quite. Swansea 6th is an interesting call, definitely not the case. West Brom 5th is correct, well done. 4th place Leicester, wow. He was certainly brave with his predictions and was 3 places off in the end. I just saw who he predicted to win the championship. Anyway, Southampton 3rd, not bad. Middlesbrough 2nd. Sunderland to win the championship. I mean, there are some spectacular predictions, but there are also some really interesting ones there from Tom there. This is why I love the championship. I love seeing those different versions of the championship table. We've only got 2 more to look at. This is Ethan's table. QPR 24th with Rotherham 23rd and Sheffield Wednesday. So almost an identical bottom 3 to me, but swapping it in a different order. Cardiff 21st, Huddersfield 20th, Plymouth 19th. I mean, yeah, all of these are relatively close-ish, probably apart from Cardiff City. Birmingham not far away. Stoke City 17th, I believe, is correct, so well done. 16th Swansea is not far away. Watford 15th, I think, is correct, actually, so good work on that. 14th Preston, he's done really, really well with that. Bristol City close. Ipswich 10 places off. Blackburn close, or if they're not really close, if I got to be real. 10th Norwich, yeah, about 4 places off there. West Brom pretty close. Hull City very close to getting that correct. Millwall bit too high. Coventry bit too high. Sunderland, I think Sunderland have been many teams' kryptonite this year by the looks of things. Middlesbrough a bit too high. Leeds 3rd was correct, so well done, that's 3. Southampton 2nd, and then Leicester to win. So that's 4 correct predictions, actually. And the final one is Jack, and I do feel for Jack with seeing his team Birmingham going down. Sheffield Wednesday, QPR, and Huddersfield. So he managed to get one of the relegated teams correctly, which was Huddersfield, but just did not predict them in the correct place. Ipswich 21st. Wow, 19 places off. I've got to say, Ipswich was a side I was jumping around all over the place in predictions, really. Cardiff 20th is a bit off. 19th Stoke, not quite. 18th Plymouth, pretty close, not quite enough. Rotherham 17th is certainly too high. Hull 16th is way too low. Bristol City not far away. Watford very close, only 1 place off. Swansea close as well. And then Sunderland, yeah, not too bad. I mean, considering how far a lot of us got Sunderland off. Then Birmingham 11th. Oh dear, that's 11 places off, sadly, with that one. 10th place Preston, which is spot on. So well done, Jack, for that. Coventry 9th is spot on too. Wow, he's on a roll now, 2 out of 2. Then Norwich, he's only 2 places off. Millwall, yeah, I think Millwall's another one where a lot of us got it a little bit wrong. Middlesbrough 6th is not far away. West Brom 5th is spot on. Blackburn 4th is a very interesting prediction, and unfortunately it hasn't paid off for him there. Southampton 3rd, not quite. Leeds 2nd, and Leicester to win. So I think a lot of us predicted the relegation teams to do well. There's only been a couple that I've seen. You know, Southampton 10th, I think, was like the only occasion where I saw a relegated side not predicting to do that well in the season. So I do hope next year that there's going to be a bit more competitiveness and the teams with the parachute payments aren't going to get too much of a financial edge. So it's going to be interesting. So the new additions in the Championship next year from the Premier League, we have basically the 3 that left the Championship last year. Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United, all 3 return. But the new additions from League One, certainly more interesting. We have got Portsmouth coming back for the first time in over 10 years. Derby are back within a couple of seasons and almost being liquidated, which is a brilliant story. And then for the first time since 1999-2000 season, Oxford United. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun in the Championship next year. If you're excited about the Championship next year, please leave your thoughts in the comments and smash the like button. It really does help. So that's going to wrap it up for my table reaction today. Overall, certainly could have been better, but it wasn't the worst prediction table ever as well. If you guys enjoyed, please smash the like button. It really does help. Please do hit the subscribe button too. It really does help. And please also share the channel too. All 3 of these things are free to do, and they all really help. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary. If you're starting this video, and as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.